Hi everyone, I'm Pat from the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore, and today I'm going to instruct you on my design center on your brand new Brother Stellaire XJ1 sewing and embroidery machine. For this video, I'm going to be using the Brother XJ1, but everything I cover here also applies to the IQ Designer in the BabyLock Altair sewing and embroidery machine, and the Brother Stellaire XJ1 and BabyLock Meridian embroidery only machines. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of my design center, like how to use the tools, how to get started using my Design Snap app, also known as the IQ Intuition Positioning app for BabyLock, and other important points to get you comfortable on your new machine. Let's get started. So now I'm going to show you how I'm going to send over the image of this panel that I have in my hoop over to my design center so that I can fill my areas with quilting or with area fills. So you can see that I've hooped my panel. I can see, obviously, I want to leave my registration marks uncovered because the app wants to use that. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to lay it flat. And I'm going to lift up my phone, and I have my app loaded on my phone. I'm going to open up my app by touching it. And I'm going to select the selection under the Design Center that says Snap Capture with Frame for pattern editing. So I'm going to select it, and it tells me hold your smart device parallel to the embroidery frame. So I'm going to say OK. And right away, the camera opens up. It takes a picture, and I have the picture on my phone. You can see here. And the message, it says send to the machine. So I'm going to select that, and I have a message that says sending. And now I have a message that says sent to my design center. So I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to go over to my machine and find my design in my design center, my image in my design center. Now let's go into my design center, the creative section of this machine. So I'm actually on my home screen here, and I'm going to come down here and select my design center. So this is where you can be creative on your machine, where you can bring in shapes and images. And I'm going to show you how to use some of those tools. I really encourage you to go in here and play with the tools and use the tools, because that's how you're going to learn how to use this section of the machine. Nothing's going to happen. You're not going to hurt the machine. Just play with these buttons. I'll give you a once-over on the tools so you have an idea, but I encourage you to use them and play and see what happens. So I just sent over the image of the panel that's in my hoop here. I had opened up my app, took a picture, sent it over. And so the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to embellish what's in my hoop at the moment. And to do that, I'm going to be using the area fill section of the machine, which is where the paintbrush is and the paint bucket. There's also a little dropper and then a piece of paper. The section on top of my area fill are my line fills. But so I'm going to start off with my area fills because I want to start off by showing you what I would do with this panel. So in order to bring this image in, I'm going to come over here to the top left, and I'm going to select that, and then I sent it over via Wi-Fi, so I'm going to touch my Wi-Fi image. And you can see that there's several images in here that have been sent over. The last one that I just sent will be on the top here, so I'm going to select it. Just wait a minute. And here it is. So it pulled it up. So I'm going to go ahead and set it. And now you can see that the image that is in my hoop is up here on my screen. So I have a magnifier underneath my little button that I just selected to bring in the image. And you can see this is a tool that you're going to be using quite often when you come into the design center. So I want to show you that when I magnify it, I'm up to 200%. You can see that over here in my preview window, I have a rectangle that I can move around. So if I wanted to, say, work on this butterfly, I would surround it with the rectangle to pull it up here to work on it. Another tool that I use a lot is this one down here. There's a little toolbar, and it actually lightens and brightens my image that I brought in. And I'm going to be showing you this as I work on my butterfly. I'm actually going to come up here and magnify the butterfly a little bit more so that you can see it better, and I'm going to center it. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to come to my area fill, and I'm going to open up, I'm going to select the piece of paper. When I do that, the attributes for my area fills open up, and you can see that I have stippling here. This one by default is selected, and that's a solid area fill. But what I'm going to do for this particular design is I'm going to touch the little circles, and this window opens up, and I'm going to touch select. So this is where my area fills are. So I can scroll down. I have 15 fills. So I want to decide what area fill or what embroidery do I want inside my butterfly. So I'm going to select this one here, number 10. And you can see that it darkens, and I'm going to say okay. And then I'm going to select a color. For the sake of the camera, I'm going to select black because I want it to show up, and you'll understand why right now. So here I've got a black crackle populates the window, what I just selected. And I'm going to select my paintbrush. I'm just going to go back up a second and show you this again. This is where I selected crackle. These are your region properties up here. So what this is basically is the size and the shape of your paintbrush. So you could have a small square paintbrush, a medium square paintbrush, and a large one. And here you could do small circle, medium circle, large circle. It defaults to a medium circle. Now you're going to understand what that means. When I select paintbrush here, and when I go to paint, can you see on my screen, this is the size of the paintbrush I selected, the medium size, and you can see that it's rounded. If I had selected square, this would be a straight line and not rounded. So basically when I'm working with round shapes like this butterfly, I like a rounded paintbrush. Okay. So I want to delete that. This is my undo button. So you can see this goes back one step. I just want to show you another tool. I'm going to put it back on. I also have an eraser. And look what happens when I select the eraser. I have the same 6 sizes and shapes as I do my paintbrush. So if I wanted to erase it, I could just erase it. So you have choices. You can undo or you can select your eraser. I'm going to go back and select my paintbrush again, and I'm going to come in here, and you can see how nice it is to have magnification, because I magnify my butterfly in order to be able to work on it. So I'm just going to roughly show you. Okay, so you can see that I've created 2 closed areas, right? Why did I do that? Because I want to show you that if I select the paint bucket that's right next to the paintbrush, I could actually pour in the fill. So this is really quite a useful tool, because if you wanted to fill a large area, you could do it easily by painting around it and then selecting your paint bucket. Okay, I'm going to select my paintbrush again, and maybe I want to do the bottom of my butterfly wings in a different area fill. So I'm going to come back in here, select something different. Maybe I want some flowers. I'm going to select it. Select a different color. I'm going to select green. Remember that no matter what color you select in here, all it is color, because this is a picture. When you take this through to embroidery, it's going to stitch out whatever color embroidery thread you put on your machine. So now you can see I've got green flowers here. So I can come in here and I can paint in. Now, if I was to go over the black, it's not going to put a fill over a fill. The black fill underneath disappears and this one takes over. So I'm going to fill both those areas. Remember, I'm going to come down here and use my toolbar. See how I can darken it? And why would I want to lighten it? Because I want to see what I've created so far. So I can actually make my whole image disappear completely and then bring it back. So it's a really handy tool. Now say I wanted to create a body for my butterfly. I could come back in here and I could select a solid fill and select a different color. I'll select red so you can see it. And actually, maybe I want to, I'm going to select a smaller paintbrush. So now I have a solid red fill. I can come here. Can you see what's happened here? Now, sometimes I spend a lot of time on this, doing this, because I love to play and create. So I'm going to bring it back to 200%. So you can see how my butterfly is shaping up. So it's a lot of fun to do this. Okay, let me show you one more thing. So now I'm going to come back in here again. I'm going to select another fill. And then we're going to move on. Say I want, it's always difficult selecting what fill you want. I'm going to select fill number 2. I'll select a green. And then I could come down here. And you see, I have my small paintbrush selected. I'm going to come back in here and select the big one because I'm filling a big area. So you can paint it in, or you can come enclose the area and fill in. If you hear that little double boom, it means that's already done, so to speak. Okay. So I can work my way around. I can fill the tree, play with this a little bit. So if I wanted to save it to memory, which normally when I create something, I save it. I've had many moments where I've taken something through and I thought, oh, I wish I had saved that so that I could go back and manipulate it some more. Remember, if you want to save it, all you do is save it into the memory pocket of the machine. And so now that is saved. If you come back tomorrow and you're done with this project, you could go into your memory pocket and delete everything. So let's go ahead and touch next. So here are some of our editing features of the fill. You can see now that the machine has selected one section of my butterfly. So let me go ahead and show you how I can manipulate or enlarge or resize and play with my fills. So you can see that it's selected one. If I wanted to link, this is a link here. So now what I've done is I have linked both tops of the wings because I want to size them down. So, and I want to size both sides of the wing the same size. So I'm going to size it down so that the size of my fill is proportionate to the butterfly wing. So you can see that I brought it down. This is size. I brought it down 50%. So now I want to travel to my next element, which is, this is where you travel through the elements of your design. Can you see what I'm doing here? And it doesn't matter which direction you travel. It ultimately is like a circle. Okay, so let me go back here. I'm going to link those two, and I'm going to bring those down to 50%. You can see there's a lot of increments, so you can play with that if you want to see what it looks like at 60%. So now I'm going to set it. I can travel to my next one, this one here. Again, the editing features open up. Maybe I want to make it at 75%. This here, your next window that keeps popping up, is the direction of your fill. So if you, with this particular design, if you change the direction, it really doesn't make any difference. But if you're doing a solid area fill, and the machine defaults maybe to stitching it sideways, and you want your area fill to go at an angle, you would touch this. And again, this is a very user-friendly machine, so you can just play with it. And what I'm doing is that I'm changing the angle of my fill. Maybe I want a 60-degree angle, so this is where you would change it. And when you're done changing it, you can set it. And then this one here, when you open this up, what it's telling you is that you can switch an outline on or off. It defaults to on, and what that means, I'm going to leave it on. When I say preview, preview means I want to see it. So I'm going to say okay, and now watch what happens. It's taken, it's taken and added an outline to that design. So if I didn't want that outline on, I could switch it off and my design would be floating there without an outline. So if I was to set it right now, it would take it through to embroidery. Let me go ahead and do that. Update the background image. I'm going to say okay. Now that I'm in the embroidery area of the machine, you can see the section here, the butterfly that has the area fill. But I wanted to show you up here what's highlighted. If I wanted to actually see my embroidery design, I could touch that, and that deletes or moves away the background image of my panel. And so now I can see clearly what it is I brought through from the design center to embroider on my panel. And again, if I wanted to bring the image back, I can touch this, it brings it back, and this makes it go away. So now let's have a bit of fun with your paintbrush tool. I have the paintbrush selected here. I'm going to come in here, select a design. So what should we select? Let's select a flower. It's selected red here. I'm going to select, let's go ahead and select the large square paintbrush. So the paintbrush you don't only use when you bring in an image like what I was showing you before. You can just play with it and be creative. So please, I encourage you to use it. So watch what I can do. I can write with it if I want. Isn't that fun? So if you have a child, a grandchild, you can play here. Now this is a good way of demonstrating the outline. So I'm just going to go next. Remember, next means I want to move forward towards completing this embroidery. Remember we talked about putting your outline on and off. If I switch this, it defaults to on. I'm going to link all 3 elements of my design, and I'm going to preview it. Preview means I want to see it. So let's say preview. I'm highlighting the outline. You see how nice it is to have the outline? It really defines your word. So now I'm going to return, and I'm going to switch it off, and then set it. Preview it means I want to see it. Now I didn't link it, so it's only going to, but you see the difference here? How it doesn't have an outline, so it's kind of lost in space, but my outline here highlights my word. So it is an important feature to have for certain elements of your design. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say all clear. All clear. It asks me, is it okay to erase all the edited image data? I'm going to say, okay, I want to start with another blank canvas. So again, back in here, the size and shape of your paintbrush. This here, if I was to select this, again with my paintbrush, when I say it's a solid fill, it's a solid fill. Now watch this. I'm going to select the big paintbrush. I want you to understand how big that is. And then the smallest one is a very fine paintbrush. So it's nice to have choices of sizes. And again, if I touch next, I would move into my editing screen. And depending on the element of your design, your features will be different down here. So if I wanted to change them all, I could link them all together. I could adjust the density if I wanted on my fill stitch. If I just leave it alone, you don't have to adjust anything if you don't want to. When I set it, there are my lines. So now I'm going to go home. I'm going to open up the Design Center again. So again, play with your paintbrush, have fun with it. And now I'm going to move up to my pencil attribute or my line attributes. Remember, this is area. These are lines. So if I come up here and I select a pencil, I can draw. So very big difference between a pencil and your paintbrush. If I touch next right now, it defaults to a black zigzag. If I want to see what it looks like pencil. So very fine as opposed to, and it's a fine zigzag as opposed to a heavier line that a paintbrush would create. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to do all clear. On this machine, did you hear when I wanted to just undo the last step? I heard like a little double boom. Once you touch next and move forward and you come back, it doesn't want you, or it doesn't allow you to go back a step. So then you would have to touch all clear, or you could grab your eraser and erase and then continue creating. Okay, so let's look at this line attribute box. If I touch the paper, this is where I can select what stitch out I want. So it defaults to a zigzag stitch. This is just a line stitch, bean stitch, candle wicking. This is a chain stitch, and this is no line at all. And you can see when you select that all your colors gray out, because you can't assign to a color to a line that is not there, so to speak. I'm going to show you that in a minute. So say we select a candle wicking stitch. I'll select a different color. Now I'm going to come over here. My pencil is still assigned. When I'm just going to stick to writing high so you understand. I want to just keep it simple. So when I touch next, I am going to link all my elements, and it's a red candle wicking. So this is where I can size the knot of my candle wicking, and this is my spacing. So just for the heck of it, I'm going to touch preview. I want you to see what default setting is. That's the default size and spacing for candle wicking. So when I go back now and I link my elements, remember anything in a black box is default setting. If I want to size up the size of my little candle wicking knot, I'm going to size it up, and you can see I have a lot of increments. So let's try that one. And then when you size up your knots, I always like to space them further apart. So you see how I'm just playing? I'm just guessing, essentially. So preview means I want to see it. So now you see how my little knots are getting bigger? Let me size them up all the way, so you up to 4. And I'm going to space them apart. I'm going to set it, preview. Did you notice I didn't link it? So look, now you can compare, you can see what my editing is doing, sizing up and spacing them further apart compared to what I originally brought through. So I hope that makes sense to you. And it's also telling you right away up here how many stitches are involved, the size of the design, how many minutes, and it's all in one color because I left it all in one color. So let's go ahead and go back, and I'm going to say all clear. Okay, so let's go back in here because there's something else up here, the line property, that we need to talk about. So it defaults to this. This is kind of like, you can see it's like a semicircle that's open-ended. So when I draw, wherever I start or finish, that's where my line starts or finishes. But if I was to come in here and I select the next one, watch what happens. If I draw, it completes, it finishes my line, it seals it. So hopefully when you understand what that is, or you play with it, when you're in a situation that you want the line to close itself, I'm going to touch next so you can see what I'm talking about. You see how it completely closed it? Whereas when I left it at the first selection, it would have just been an arc. So it's a handy thing to have. Believe me, I always feel like all the tools that are in here are useful at the moment that you need them. So knowing that it's here is good. Now this is one that I like. I'm gonna put this back to a straight stitch instead of a candle wicking. So sometimes you may be creating a design. Let's bring in a shape. I'll bring in a circle. And I'm going to select my straight line. If I want to divide this and have a perfectly straight line, I can do it, because believe me, using this, you see how I've got it selected on my screen? It is very hard on this screen with a stylus or with a mouse to draw a straight line. It's impossible. So they've put that feature in there for you to use. See how nice that is? So you may want, see how now I went into my area fill and I took my paint bucket and I can start playing. I can undo, because I want to go back to my line properties. Okay, so let's go back up here. This last one is point to point. This is a feature that I use when I am creating an applique, or I want to create a closed line around an object or an image. So let me show you how this works. So if I was to touch my screen now, you can see this is point to point. I touch, and it closes the line. So I can touch, 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 touch. See what I'm doing? So sometimes when I bring an image in, like I brought in the image of my panel, and I wanted to create an outline, I can use my point to point. Oh, it continued down here. I'm just going to undo. And it'll go filling in the line. It's really cool feature. And you can see here that whatever I select of my pencil, it populates here so you know what you're doing. So this is point to point. So now let's take a look at the built-in shapes in this machine. So we're going to come down the screen and there's a circle and a square. So I'm going to open it up. As you look along the top, it automatically defaults to this. So this is kind of a category, so to speak. If I was to select this one, there's more shapes, built-in shapes. If I was to select this one, these are your open shapes. This next one I'm going to skip over right now so that I can cover it and explain it better in another shot. This one here is a very, very cool feature that I use a lot. This is where you select your hoop size. But right now we're talking about shapes, so I'm going to go back to the beginning here. So it defaults to my very first page of basic shapes. So, and it also defaults underneath here to a basic kind of an empty square. So if I was to select a shape, say I select a teardrop and I leave it selected at the empty square there, if I say okay, I've got a teardrop on my screen. I'm going to undo, I'm going to go back in here, and the only thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to select this, and you see how my screen changes now? If I select the same teardrop, it pulls up the teardrop with a fill already in it. So I'm going to undo, I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to select the next one. This one, if I select the same shape and come back, it selects the teardrop with a fill and an outline. I'm going to touch next and preview so that you can see essentially what I've got. So I'm going to return, go all clear and say okay. Normally, when I come in here, I'm just looking for a shape. I have to say that I don't use these very often, but they're there if you want to use them. So let's go ahead and select a shape. I don't know why, but I always select a heart. I like the heart shape. And remember that it has a lot of built-in shapes, but you could also have the ability with your app to bring in more shapes. So it's infinite, really, how much you can create with shapes in the Design Center. Okay, so I have a heart selected here. Now remember, this is a picture. It's not an embroidery design yet. I can manipulate this heart or my shape. So what's happened here is that more windows have opened up. I now have the ability to size it. And so when I select size, it tells me what size my heart is. It's 5.85 inches by 6.37 inches. I can size it down proportionately. And the reason why I told you, remember this is still a picture, is I could size it down to 1 inch if I wanted. So infinite amount of sizes almost. You're limited by the size of your hoop essentially. If I wanted to reset it to the original size, whenever you see kind of an empty square like this, you touch it, it resets it to its original size. If I want to move it, I can move it around on my canvas. You want to bring it back to the center, just touch center. Okay, so if I wanted to duplicate it, I could duplicate it, and you can see that the second heart it brings up, it offsets. So normally the first thing I do is I come in here and I move it back to the center, and then I can size it down. And you can see up here that it's sizing it down as I'm doing it. If I wanted another heart, I could select another duplicate here, and it would duplicate it as many times as I wanted. So, but we're just going to leave it like that as is. Now, if I want to touch next because I want you to see as I move along what actually is happening. I'm going to say preview and say okay. So the machine, the software will default to a zigzag stitch. So I want to show you, and obviously you have your editing features. You can adjust the width of your zigzag, and you can also adjust the density of your zigzag. See here, sometimes when you open the window is when it explains to you what that window is. So again, open the windows and see what it tells you. When we say these are user-friendly machines, they are user-friendly machines. And remember, if you want to link the two and edit them the same, link them together. But we're going to go back and I want to show you, it defaulted to a zigzag. But if I want to change the line attribute, I can come in here and I could say, you know, I want a chain stitch, and I'll select a bright purple. So in order to assign the purple chain stitch to it, I have to select the paint bucket, and I'm going to magnify it a little bit. And actually, I'm going to change the color so that you can notice it better on screen. I'm going to select lime green. So I've got the paint bucket selected in my line attribute section of the machine. And now I'm going to touch, and can you see that my line changed to lime green? That means that I have a lime green chain stitch there now. And if I want to change this one, so you're pouring in another line into your outline, so to speak. So now if I was to come down here into my area fill and I wanted to fill this, I could come in here and I could select my stippling, select a different color, select the paint bucket, because I don't want to paint it in. I want to fill an area. So I could come in here and say, I want stippling in my little heart. And I could come back over here, open up my area fills and say, I want fill number 3. I'm going to select another color. And I'm going to select my paintbrush, my paint bucket in my area fill stayed selected. So I'm going to touch. See what I'm creating. This is how I create my quilt blocks. Now, let's go back into the shapes here a second. Because when I came across the top here, I told you this was your hoop. So when you select your hoop size in this section of the machine, say I wanted to create a quilt block with my 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. When I come in here, I'm going to select another fill. It's all going to come together for you in 1 second. I'll select the basket weave. And I'll select light purple. Select the paint bucket. So you see, when I select my hoop size in here, it adds a border. I don't want to confuse you with this, but this can be confusing, and so I like to explain it very clearly. If you were to select a hoop size in your settings up here, it does not create a border. It's just a visual on your screen. If you want a border, in other words, a border to contain your area fills, you need to come in here. Sorry, you need to come in here and select your hoop size there. So now if you wanted to save this to memory, because maybe you want to come back tomorrow and pull up your quilt block again, you can save it. This is where you save into your memory pocket here. if I come back tomorrow and I want to pull it out of my memory pocket, I would use the one that's opposite to that, where the arrow is pulling out. So now let's touch next, and let's look at the elements here in my editing screen. So the machine automatically, or the software, selected my basket weave because I can see it on my preview window. Remember, I told you before, you can select different elements by traveling through your design here. So you can see I've got a basket weave element. I've got my other red area fill. I've got my purple stippling. I've got my chain stitch. And you don't have to change anything if you don't want to. If I wanted to leave it all at default, I could select preview, which I'm going to do right now so that you can see that I've not touched anything. And these are the default settings of the of your area fills. But looking at this, I feel like my red area fill doesn't look proportionate to the size of my heart. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to find the red and I'm going to edit it. So you see how I travel through, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to size it down to 65%. And then I'm going to say preview. And now you're going to see, you see how much smaller it is in here? So it just makes more sense to do that. And if I wanted to save it to memory right now, it would save it with the changes. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back again, and I'm coming back to my original screen. Now you'll see that some of your editing features, size, rotate, have been grayed out because I moved forward and now I've come back. So that's just what the software does. So I always like to, as I select my shapes, I like to edit them and change them as I move along. Now, see, I want to undo, it won't let me. It's because I already moved through and I've come back. So try to get your editing done beforehand. Okay, so I'm going to select all clear. And I want to show you another couple of buttons on this machine. So I'm going to go back into my shapes, and I want to show you, I'm going to go to the open shapes and just play a little bit. So maybe I'm going to select the leaf. I'm going to go ahead and size it. I'll size it down. So I know that one of the things that I hear the most is you don't want to hurt your machine. You're not hurting your machine by playing with all your buttons here, so to speak. So now if I want to duplicate it, I can duplicate it, and I could rotate the second one. And then I could take it and drag it if I want. And I could rotate it some more, 10 degrees, 90 degrees. Now, watch this, you see now that I wanted to move this one, it doesn't allow me to move it, but so this is your select button. So when you touch this, it's a square underneath your eraser. You can put your stylus down on the screen, and now you can select what it is you want to edit. So you see how the red box is around there now? So now I can move it. I can deselect it if I want. And now I can select this one. And if I wanted to move this one, I can play with it. So this is kind of, it's an important tool in that you can retrace your steps somewhat and select. Maybe you want to tweak it a little bit more and rotate it. Again, you can use your move button here if you don't want to, if you have a lot of elements on your screen. Sometimes that's what I do. If you want to save it to memory. And then of course, you can use your eraser if you feel that you want to erase something, you can erase it. The small eraser came up. Maybe I want to erase half of this design or just a part of it. You can use your eraser, you can use your undo. See how it keeps putting it back? You can use your all clear. All clear means I want a clear screen. I want to start again. So I want to show you, I'm going to bring in another shape and show you one more thing here. Let's see. Why don't I bring in, I have a flower and I am going to go ahead and use my select, and I am going to select half of it. Now, can you see I have a little pair of scissors here? If I touch that, it deletes or cuts away that half of my design. I have a little button here that's copy and paste. It puts it back. It's cut it in half. And so what does that mean, or why would I use that? You can start creating your own designs. I don't have one off the top of my head that I could show you to create right now, but I wanted to show you how I just play with the tools and create. So even though it has a limited amount of shapes in there, remember that you can bring in more shapes with your app, and you can also, by using your editing tools here, cut your shapes in half, size them, rotate, and do all kinds of fun stuff with your built-in shapes. Now I'm going to show you how to send over a line image or a line design. This is out of a coloring book. I'm going to send this over to my machine using the app and Wi-Fi. So remember, you have to connect your machine to Wi-Fi, and your phone with the app on it has to be connected to the same Wi-Fi for this to work. So I'm going to set my line design or my picture from my coloring book, and you can see that it's you need to use a very clear picture. If you crease this or you have any marks on it, your camera is going to pick up everything. So you want to start out with as clean a design as you can for better results. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my phone and I'm going to open up my app. And to do this particular technique, sending over a line design, I'm going to come to the second option, which is in my design center, the snap capture with frame. When it says with frame, it's going to be looking for a hoop for pattern editing. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and it says hold your smart device parallel to the embroidery frame, which is how I would be holding it right now. So over the frame, and I'm going to say okay. And now you'll see the picture, the camera opens up and it says hold. And just like that, it's taken the picture already. It's really quite amazing. And so the picture is on my screen and it says send to the machine. So I'm going to follow the instructions. It says sending, and now it says sent. So it does it very quickly. It says sent to my design center. So I'm going to say okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to my machine and open up my design center and look for that design in my machine. Now I'm going to show you how to find the picture that I sent over to my design center. So I'm on my home screen. I'm going to select the design center, and if you come up to the top of the screen, there's a little selection here that's got a little leaf, and only the outline is showing. So it's like a line, and it says right next to it line. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to come down here and select my Wi-Fi because I brought it over via Wi-Fi, and I'm going to open up my last design, which is always goes to the top, and there it is. Okay, so now I'm going to set it. Set it means I want to see it or use it as opposed to delete. Okay, so here it brought up, look at how perfect that is, my ice cream sundae on my screen. So it tells me right away the size up here, and it tells me it's framing the image. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to crop down and get as close to your design as possible and get rid of all the lines or whatever in the background. We're cleaning it up a little bit here. Okay, so I've got a red cropping line, so to speak, around there. And then moving down the screen, the grayscale detection level does just that. It detects the scale of the gray, so you can darken it or lighten it. I always leave it at the center. I really never touch this, so you can leave it alone. The next thing, this box is telling me that the line that it is going to assign to my design is going to be a zigzag. Now I want to show you something while we're on this screen. I stitched it out and assigned it a straight stitch as opposed to a little zigzag. So we're going to have to do some changes here. So first of all, I can't change that in this screen. So I'm just going to say, okay. So here it is again. And up here, I've got a new window that says original views. So I can toggle between these. I can look at my original view, which is my picture. And this is the result that the machine came up with, sending it over. So it's pretty darn good. I've got a magnifier again up here if I want to magnify. And then this appears the same. So I'm going to say set it. And now it brings up my drawing onto my canvas. I call this my canvas because this is where I'm doing my work, right? And up here is my window in case I want to magnify. So what is it that I want to do to this design? In the case of what I have stitched out here, I want to change the stitching of the line. So I'm going to come in here to the little, I'm going to come up to my line attribute section, and I'm going to open this up, and you see how the machine defaulted to a zigzag? I want to change it to a straight, to a line. And I am going to change my color to a bright color, and you're going to see why in a minute. I assigned it pink, and now I'm going to say okay. So I'm going to magnify it a little bit so you see what happens. So again, I magnified it to 200 so I can move around my design up here. So I want to change the default zigzag to a pink straight stitch. How do I do that? I take my paint bucket in my line attribute section and I pour in the pink straight stitch. And I do that by touching. Can you see that any of the lines that were connected to this original line, the pink bled through or it runs through. Any line in here that's disconnected is left as a black zigzag. So if you want to change everything, you need to move around your screen. Can you see how it's changing? So I'm reassigning another stitch. Now, I'm going to move around here and I'm going to move to the top here. These are supposed to be like little, I don't know, little shavings of chocolate or something. And maybe I don't want that. Or maybe there's too many. Because remember that when you go to stitch this out, there are going to be designs that you send over to your machine that have a lot of detail. And it's going to take a lot of time to stitch it out. And it may be unnecessary stitching. So generally what I do a lot is that if I feel like I don't really need that, I'll grab my eraser, and in this case I'm going to actually select a small one, and I'm going to come back and erase those out. because I don't need all of that, and it's going to be a lot of stitching and a lot of cutting and a lot of time for whatever reason. Maybe you want to leave one or two of them. Now you can see that as I erase them, the original image is still on the back. What you're seeing shaded through is the original image that I sent over, that I took a picture of. If that bothers you, remember you have your little toolbar down here, and you can make that go away. You see what I just did? I can bring back my original picture, but I can also make it go away. So I've made it go away, and now I'm going to move my magnification around, and I'm going to keep erasing. Now I'm going to leave some of my stitching with the black zigzag, so when I take it through and digitize it, or the machine digitizes it, you get a clearer picture of what's happening here. So, and remember, when you're using your eraser, if you leave the slightest speck behind, the machine is going to want to stitch that. Believe me, it's happened to me where I think to myself, why is the machine stitching just like a pixel dot? And it's because I used my eraser and I didn't erase everything. Okay, there's one more thing I'm going to do here before I take it through and finish up. I am going to come into my area fill settings. I could leave this as a line embroidery like this, but I want to go ahead and add some area fills, maybe a little bit more detail. So this lends itself really well to doing that. So I'm going to come to my area attributes. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select a fill. In this case, actually, I'm going to leave it as a solid fill, and I'm going to select pink. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select my paint bucket in my area fill, and I'm going to touch there. So you see how it's poured in a fill, and now I can, if I want, I can assign it there. If I want to change color, I can go in here. Remember, every time you change color, you're creating a color stop in your embroidery so that you can also change the color on your embroidery machine. Now, when I touch that, it means I touched, or there was a broken line and it bled out. So you might have to fix it. And to fix it, what I would need to do is magnify it, move down to that section, look for the broken line, and I could grab my pencil and just fill in the broken line so that my area fill does not pour out. So this needs a little fixing. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and, you know what, I'm going to make the cherry red on top. I can't not do that. Okay, so there we go. I could keep on playing with this, but what I want to do now is touch next. And this is where I can edit or change my elements. We talked about this before, how you can travel through. And you can see that it's grabbing whatever I left in black as a zigzag. But I'm going to leave it alone and just say preview, which means I want to see it. Show it to me, and it's working on digitizing it, and there it is. So now you get a really clear picture of what I was saying before. Whatever I did not reassign to a pink straight stitch stayed as a little black zigzag. And then I have my area fill, and then I have my pink lines. If I wanted to save it to memory, I could do that. If I like it, I can just go ahead and set it, say okay. Update the background image. It's going to ask you, because I brought that image in, and I'm going to take it to embroidery, and I am ready to stitch it out. Just touch embroidery and I'm ready to stitch it out. And then if I want to switch my original image off or take it off my screen, remember I've got a little button here that is selected right now. I can deselect it and my background image is going to go away, and it leaves just my embroidery design on my screen ready to stitch out. Now I want to give you a helpful tip that will save you time when bringing in a design like this to your machine. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my design center. And before I pull my image up, in other words, before I open up my line and bring my image into my screen, I'm going to go ahead and open this up and assign a straight stitch. And I'm going to assign a color other than black because I want to make sure that it's assigning a pink straight stitch. So now I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to my Wi-Fi. I'm going to select my design. I'm going to find it. It's the last one that I put in. I'm going to set it. And now I want you to notice that the first time I did this, I had a black zigzag down here, but now I have a pink straight line. So what I've actually done is I've saved myself a lot of time, and right from the beginning, I'm just going to crop it down a little bit. Right from the beginning, I've assigned my whole picture a stitch like this. Now I don't have to go in there and reassign, select a paint bucket and reassign everything. It's all in a straight stitch. Now when I touch next, here, by the way, when you select a straight stitch, this one, not the bean stitch, just a straight stitch, the only thing or item that you can edit is the length of the stitch. So this little box that shows up here, when you touch it, it says run pitch. Run pitch basically means stitch length. So you can adjust, and the default is 0.080. You can make your stitch length longer or shorter here and then set it. I'm going to leave it at default because I like the default on my straight stitch for this kind of thing. So now when I say preview and OK, you see it's all in a straight stitch. So now I'm going to say set, OK. Update the background image. I'm going to say OK. If I canceled it, it would not appear. Okay, so now it brought up my background image. I can switch it off if I like. And now that I can see very clearly that I didn't have to do all the work of reassigning. And I just want to remind you too, you can come in here and you can magnify it. And you've also got your stitch simulator here. So when you select this, it's going to show you how it's going to stitch out. So this is a button that you should be using because it's nice to be able to see your design stitched out before you stitch it out. And when you're done, just close your window, select embroidery, and you're ready to stitch. Now I'm going to show you how to position a pattern on this garden flag that I have hooped in my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. And you'll notice that I have my registration marks showing very clearly. The reason why the garden flag is hooped a little bit higher is because it was very bulky on the top here. So when you're hooping something, work with what you're hooping. And so we moved it up a little bit because when I send over this picture to my machine, I'm going to be able to take my monogram or whatever it is I want to embroider on here, and I can move it up and position it where I want it. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to lay this flat. I'm going to pick up my device, or my phone in this case, and I'm going to find my app. I'm going to open it up, and the feature that I'm going to use is called Snap Capture with Frame for pattern positioning. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and it says hold your smart device parallel to the embroidery frame. It always reminds me. So I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to make sure that it's level, and look at how quick that was. Okay, so it took the picture, send to the machine. Yes, I want to send it over to my machine, and it says sent to embroidery, and I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to come around to my machine and I'm going to pull it up and embroider it on my garden flag. So now I'm in front of the machine, having sent over the image with the app of a wreath on my garden flag. I have the wreath still in the hoop. When you send an image over, you want to leave your project in your hoop exactly how you sent it over. So I've put the hoop in the machine, I've got it locked down, and I'm ready to embroider. So the next thing I'm going to do is come over to my screen and find my design that I want to position in my hoop or on my wreath in my hoop. Okay, there's one thing that I wanted to explain to you. When you open up your app on your phone, there's going to be an embroidery section. The top of the app is embroidery, and that's the section that we used. So when I come to my screen here, instead of going to my design center, I'm going to go to embroidery because I used the app to send over an image for me to position an embroidery pattern where I want it on my project. Okay, so we're not going to my design center in this case. Okay, so I'm going to come to embroidery, and I want to embroider a monogram. So I'm going to open up category number 3 and monogram number 2, and I'm just going to select the letter E. And so this is my embroidery design on my screen. I'm going to go ahead and set it. Okay, so you'll notice that my image is here. Now let me just explain something else to you so you're very clear about this. This switches the image on or off that you sent over with your app. When you first come here, it's possible that the last image that you sent over may be on here. In other words, my ice cream cone or my ice cream cup, that image, because that's the last thing I did before sending this one over, that image could very easily be on there. So if that's the case, you'll get a message that opens up along the bottom that says, it asks you, do you want to update your image? I believe that's what it says. Do you want to update? And you're going to say yes. So when you say yes, that image of the ice cream cup goes away, and then this one, the latest one, pops up. And remember, I'm in embroidery. I'm in the embroidery section of the machine. So the only reason why I want that image is because I want to be able to very easily position my embroidery design where I want. So my letter E, my monogram, comes up always in the center of my hoop, but because I had moved my wreath up, I want to move up my design in the center. And right away I can see that it's a little big for that. So I can size it. So I can come to edit. And when I open up my size, I always like to select this here. When I select this, the machine is going to ask me, is it okay to reset the pattern to its original size, angle, and position? You're always going to say okay to that. What the machine is going to do, or the software, is that it's going to take your design and put it back in the center, because if you want to size your design and you had moved it up to the top left corner, it wouldn't have room to grow bigger. So it wants to resize it in the center. And what I've done by touching this selection is that I've activated recalculating software. In other words, as I size it up, I can size it up 200%, and I can size it down 60%, and it's going to add and take away the appropriate amount of stitches so that your design always looks good. So now I'm going to position it, and I'm going to size it in place. See how nice and easy that is? Very, very visual. If you were to not select that and you leave this little square selected, the machine is only going to allow you to size it up 20% and down 10%. So I'm just in the habit of every time selecting this, because I want the max and the minimum amount. And I always say okay when it says I want to position it back in the center. So always before you play a lot with positioning your designs everywhere, always open up your size and activate this first. So if I like this, can you see that I can also, I'm actually grabbing the corner. You can actually size it on your screen by grabbing the corner, and you can also move it. So position it where you want it. And once I'm done with that, I think that looks nice. Maybe you want to add another letter. Maybe you want to add a little butterfly. If you wanted to add anything else, you could just go to add. It would take you back to your home screen and you could add something else. Let me just show you one more thing here that is very nice for previewing your design. Remember, if you go into your library, your color library here, and you wonder, you know, what would that monogram look like in another color? You can select another color here. So you kind of showcase it on your project in the color, whatever color you want. And then when you've decided, okay, that's the color that I like, I'm going to embroider that color, just say, okay, select embroidery. It moves up into position. Do you see how it moved up? And now I've got a little green cross. That's the center of my embroidery design. And don't forget that up here, you have a little W plus that's telling you to use the W embroidery foot. But when I touch that, my little red laser beam or light comes on, which is also very helpful. So don't forget to use this very helpful tool in the top left of your screen. So now I'm going to show you how to do the advanced placement for your embroidery design using the app and using the embroidery positioning marker that I have down here. So an embroidery positioning marker comes, sheets of them come with your machine. And so when you look at the little marker, it actually looks like a little snowman. So it is important to know and to understand that the little top circle, in other words, the snowman's head, would be the top of your embroidery design. The center of the snowman's belly, the center mark, which is the center of the axis, would be the center of your embroidery design. And you're going to understand that in a minute, but it is important to position the embroidery marker in the right direction, because the top of the embroidery positioning marker being the head means that if you were to position your sticker upside down, it's going to position your design upside down. If you were, when would you want to use something like this? So if you were embroidering a design and it was bulky and difficult to hoop, difficult maybe like a denim jacket or something where you have to hoop your project in such a way that it's crooked in the hoop. Maybe you're not a good hooper and you want something to be perfectly straight, maybe a logo or something. So you can position your embroidery positioning marker where you want it and line it up with the axis. And if you hoop it crooked, the machine is going to read that and it's going to adjust your design according to the angle of which you positioned your marker at. So I hope that's clear. It really comes together when you see it actually being done. Normally I use this positioning marker when I'm embroidering a logo, for instance, on a shirt, and I draw my straight line, and then my axis, and I put my positioning marker over the axis, and then I hoop my shirt maybe a little crooked, and so the machine's going to take that logo and adjust, stitch it exactly where the marker is, and when I take it out of my hoop, it's going to be perfect. Okay, let's move on here. So I have my embroidery positioning marker at a slight angle on my fabric here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my app on my phone. I'm going to open up my app, And I'm going to use the same one that I used previously with this lemon wreath, this garden flag. So I'm going to touch Snap Capture with Frame for pattern positioning. And it says hold your smart device parallel, and I'm going to say OK. And down here, I'm going to select Advanced. On the bottom of my screen, I have Easy and Advanced because I'm using my embroidery positioning marker. So it says affix the embroidery positioning sticker at the embroidery location. And I did that already, and I'm going to say OK. And it says hold 3, hold 2, hold 1, and it takes the picture. So now I'm going to send it to the machine. Same steps as before. Sent to embroidery. Okay. Notice it says sent to embroidery. So it's in the embroidery section of the machine. So now I'm going to go to my machine and show you how to retrieve that image and place my design. So now I'm at the machine and I want to position my embroidery design on the place where I stuck my little embroidery positioning marker. So I'm going to come over to my screen and I am going to select, I think I'm going to select and just write a word. I'll write hello. This may not make sense, but on the other hand, I'm trying to teach you how to use the tools. So I'm going to write hello. Maybe I want to add that onto my banner. So there it is on my screen. I'm going to set it. Okay, so now you can see that I get a message. The image was sent from the mobile app update. I'm going to say yes because this image that I have on here is a previous image. I actually moved my embroidery positioning marker from here to further down on top of the welcome. So when this, again, when this message comes up, yeah, I want to update it because I want the latest image that I just sent over. So I'm going to say, okay. So now it says the carriage of the embroidery unit will move, and I'm going to say, okay. Okay. So now on my screen, you can see that my needle moved, or my foot is now placed on top of the little belly of the snowman, and the little red laser light came on, and it's almost perfect on top of the center of the little belly. So my hoop moved when this came up on my screen. So what it's telling me here is I have the opportunity right now to tweak it a little bit more. So if that little red light isn't exactly in the center, I'm going to move it over, and it's, you may not see this on camera, so I'm just tweaking it and moving it over so the little red dot is on top of the center of my axis too. Okay, so, and it tells me up here what to do. So I've done it. Now I'm going to say okay. And again, here's the picture, and I'm moving the little red light to be in the center of the axis, or the axis here. Okay, now I'm going to say okay. So now what is it going to do? Okay. So now I'm going to come over here to edit. Check here. I'm going to touch embroidery. I'm going to come up here to my layout, and I'm going to open my layout. And look at what I have on my screen. I have a little button with the same image of the little embroidery positioning marker. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And it says, is it okay to revert to the original position and/or angle? I'm going to say okay. Okay, so this is a new screen to use. So what it's doing is that it took my word, or my embroidery design, so to speak, and it positioned the marker exactly in the center, because that's what I told you it would do. I positioned it, and right in the center. So now I have the opportunity, and you don't have to do this. This is an advanced feature of the app, so you may have to play with it a little bit. But I have the opportunity right now to change where my word is going to go. So if I was to touch here, do you see how it moved my little embroidery positioning marker down? So if I move it over here, so that is the bottom center of my design. If I moved it over here, this is the bottom right of my design. So what the machine is telling me is that if I leave this selected here, it's going to position my embroidery design and where the marker would be on my bottom right corner as opposed to the center. I hope that makes sense, but as I move around, you see how I'm moving it? It changes around. If I want to put it back to the center, I would select this and that puts it back to the center. So I'm going to leave it centered and I'm going to say, okay. The carriage of the embroidery unit will move. Keep your hands away. I'm going to say, okay. And the machine moves into position to start embroidering. So now it says the pattern was moved. In other words, it took my pattern, the word hello, and moved it down on top of the embroidery positioning marker where I want it. Remove the embroidery positioning mark. So peel the sticker off because you don't want to embroider over your sticker, and the machine has done its job. So I'm going to say, okay. And look at what it did here. Can you see that it put my word hello at an angle because I had stuck my sticker at an angle? So it positioned it exactly where I wanted it to go at an angle. If I had put the snowman's head going down, it would have turned my word upside down. So it's a very, very nice feature on this machine for really an advanced feature on the app for you to be really creative, but also accurate in positioning your embroidery designs on your project. Now I'm going to show you the last feature or button on your app, which is the one all the way at the bottom of the app. So just to recap a little bit, we did the embroidery one where we brought the design in two different ways, easy and advanced, to embroider on the garden flag. And then the next one down my design center says snap capture with frame for pattern editing. That's the one where I showed you where I brought in a panel and I filled areas with my brush. The last one is select image for pattern editing. So this is one where the machine and the software wants to digitize everything that you bring in. So this is where I always tell you when you're looking at this machine or we're talking about the actual digitizing software and the capabilities of the software, it has limited digitizing software. So if you were to say to me that you wanted to bring in an image of your dog or a complicated logo, it's just not going to come out well. If you want to digitize a logo, I would send it to a professional digitizer. But this machine has enough software in the design center, and you're seeing the capabilities of it, that you can have a good time with it. So I always say, try it. So I'm going to show you this part of the app and the design center that's fun to play with, and you'll be surprised at what results you get from it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select the one on the bottom, the last one that we haven't covered. It says select image for pattern editing. And what's going to happen is it takes me to my camera roll. In other words, it takes me to my pictures that are on my camera or my device. So I'm going to select one. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and it gives me a message, my Design Snap would like to access your photos. So I'm going to say, just make a selection, and then I'm going to send it to the machine. The message comes on down below, and I selected some flowers. So send to the machine, and it's sending, and now it's sent to my design center. So I'm going to say okay. So I finished with the app, and remember now, because I selected this in my design center in my app, I'm going to go to my design center on my machine. So we have different options here. We covered the line option, just again to recap a little bit. That's when I brought in the bowl of ice cream and we were looking at lines. And this is where we brought in an image. Here is the last one where we're going to select. It's going to bring us to this screen, and I'm going to go to the Wi-Fi. So it's going to bring me to this screen. I'm going to select the last one that I just sent over. And here are my flowers. So I'm going to set. And it's going to pull it up in a screen that we have not really covered before. So right away, I have the ability to frame the image. So I could frame it down, crop out what I don't want. I actually am going to leave most of this in here. And as I go cropping, the size changes here. Now, what have we got on the bottom of the screen here? So this is something that you are going to learn by touching the buttons and playing with it. So by default, the max number of colors that comes up, it says 10. But I want to show you that I could take it all the way to 15, and I could take it all the way down to 3, I believe. So a lot of times when I bring in an image to 2, I leave it at the default because I want to see, well, what is the machine going to do with 10 colors? So I don't touch anything or change anything here. I just say, okay. And so you can see here that I call this the thinking bar. It's working on digitizing all of this. In other words, it's working on adding stitches, turning this into an embroidery design, the whole framed image that I have here. So I'm going to let it, it's just going to take a second. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer. You just have to be patient. See what it does. It's working hard doing this. So then it's going to come up with a result. I've sometimes sat here in front of my machine with this screen and gone to every color. Okay, so look at what we have. So if you want to look at the original view, that's what it was. This is the result. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the machine, you know what, take it to 15. I'm going to max out the number of colors, and I'm going to say retry. So it's going to try again. Sometimes I bring in pictures off my phone and I'll try maybe 6 or 7 different maximum number of colors and see which result I like the best. And sometimes, honestly, I don't get a result that I like, but I feel like, okay, my machine did its best with the software that it has, and this is what it's going to do with it. So there's nothing wrong with your machine. It's doing its best, and it will come up with something that you may like. I have brought photos over in the past, and I've had the photos are recognizable as the person that it is, but it's not going to be the shading. The machine, the software may have trouble with the shading or the features around the eyes. So look at this now. So I quite like that. It looks very artsy to me. Now I'm going to touch something down here that I haven't shown you, and this again is something that you can play with. I'm going to select that it add a line. And as soon as I select that, it asks me what width of line. I'm going to leave it at 3.0 millimeter, and I'm going to say retry it. So it's going to try to add some lines and detail work. So again, it's trying. I think I'm going to get a better result that I like better adding the black line, but I don't know. So just let it think a little bit more. So definitely try it. Bring in a picture, play with these buttons, change a number of colors. You can remove the background if you want. That's another button that it'll work on, trying to remove some of the stitches in the background. As I say, I've done it sometimes 6, 7, 8 times, and I just keep touching retry to see what the software does with the image that I've brought in. So it's just taking a little bit longer here because it's adding detail work by adding a line. Almost done. So you see it added detail work here. I'm going to magnify it a little bit. It's added detail work here. See all of that? And it's also added some black lines and detail work to the actual embroidery design. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and set it. And so once I set it, it brings it up into my canvas, so to speak, still in my design center. So I do have the ability now, if I wanted to take my eraser and erase something out, I could do that. If I wanted to save it to the memory pocket of my machine, I could. So I could play, it's allowing me to play with some of these features. I could pull up my pencil and add some lines to it if I wanted. But what I want you to be aware of is that it may, at some point, you may have too many stitches for this machine to stitch out. This machine will stitch out a maximum, I believe, of 600,000 stitches. So sometimes when I've created or worked on a design like this that is very intricate and I know it's stitch intensive, sometimes as I move through towards finishing the design and stitching it out, you may get a message that says too much data, and the machine won't let you move forward because it is too much data. It's too much for it to handle. In which case you could go back, and depends how much you want the picture, how much you want to stitch it out. One of the things you could do is go back to your initial one and crop it down in size so you have less data at the end. So you can certainly keep playing with it. Okay, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to touch next. And so now I'm in my editing screen where I can change the direction of my fills if I want. I'm going to leave it alone because these are solid fills and I don't want to touch anything. So I'm going to say preview, and I'm hoping that it's not going to say this is too much data. So it's working on it. It's converting it from a picture into an, look at that. So right away up here, it tells me the size. It tells me 139,616 stitches. I told you there was going to be a lot of stitches in this. 258 minutes. This is the stitch out here, the order in which it wants to stitch out. So if I'm quite impressed. So now I'm going to go ahead and set it. Remember, bottom right of your screen. This message is telling you basically that you're leaving the design center and you're going into embroidery. And there is my embroidery design. So I could select embroidery. At this point, it may or may not let me go through if I have the wrong hoop size or whatever, but I've made it all the way through, and look at that. Now I've got in my preview window, it tells me what it's going to stitch out first, and then this is the rest of the stitch out. If I want to save it to memory, I can save it to memory. And so that is the last option or choice on your app. And wow, it came out really nice. I am impressed. Now I want to show you a really cool feature in the embroidery section of the machine that works in conjunction with the design center of the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and come into embroidery first of all, and I'm going to come into category number 1, and I'm going to select a design that has a distinct outline, and you'll understand why in a minute. And this looks very pretty, so I'm going to select number 6. And I'm going to go ahead and set it. And I'm going to open up my edit here. And I'm going to come down, and this is a selection, a button that I had not talked about before. So it looks like the outline of a flower. And what it basically does when I touch this is that it adds an outline of the design. So it's highlighted, and the actual embroidery design kind of is more translucent, because what the machine has done is grab the outline. So what have I got over here? I've got the ability with a plus or minus to move the black line, the distance between my outline and the embroidery design. So play with it, touch it. You can actually touch the plus and keep it pressed down, and you can see how it's gradually moving it away. Now I'm going to take it back a minute to the original setting. Can you see that it really picked up here the detail of the antenna? A lot of times when I'm creating something, I don't want all that detail work because it gets a little messy sometimes when it's stitching out. So I'll take this and I'll move my outline away until the detail work kind of merges into one outline. You'll understand that when you start playing with this and you realize now I've got a cleaner outline. And if you were to select the minus, it'll do the opposite. It'll pull the outline in. So once I've put my outline where I wanted, and I like that, I have 2 options. I can cancel or I can select memory. I don't want to cancel, so my only other option is memory. And the machine is going to tell me, recall from my design center stamp pattern list. And I'm going to say, okay. Okay, so now when I'm back on this screen, I say you have a decision to make. You have to decide, did you want to stitch all these butterflies out and add an outline to it? Or did you just want the outline? In this case, I don't want to stitch all these butterflies. I don't want these butterflies as part of my design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home. If I wanted these butterflies to be part of my design, I would go to add and I would add the outline. But I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to go home and it's going to ask me, is it okay to cancel? And I'm going to say, yeah, because I grabbed my outline and the machine told me, go to my design center, come in here and look at what I have up here on the screen. Remember when we talked about the shapes that are built in, I said I would cover this little button later. So now when I touch it, this is where my outlines are saved from my embroidery section of the machine. And you can see that we have other outlines in here that are saved. It's actually a really cool feature to use on monograms. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and select it and say, okay. So now I have an outline on my canvas that I can manipulate, I can fill, I can size, I can cut. So I can do all kinds of stuff. I could, if I wanted to, I could save it to the memory pocket of the machine right away, but it's already saved in my outline, so I probably wouldn't need to, I wouldn't do that, but I could come into my size and I could say, you know what, I want to size it down. And now I want to duplicate it. And you see how it offsets the second one? I'm going to come into size and center it, and I'm going to size my second one up. So look at what's happening. This is actually is kind of cool. I'm going to size it up a little bit more. Okay, so you see how I'm just using my outline. So now I could, if I wanted to, I could come in here and I could say, you know what, I want a flower in the center. So I'm going to select a shape and I'm going to size that one down to fit in the center. Okay. So now I want to maybe fill. I want to select a fill. I want roses. I want pink roses. So I'm in my fills. I'm going to select the paint bucket and I'm going to say, okay, fill that. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to select another fill. Maybe I want, it's always so difficult to select. Maybe I'll select that one. Actually, I'm going to select some leaves. I'll come back over here and select number 1 are really pretty leaves. Select green. My paint bucket stayed selected. So this I have to fill each one individually. And then I'm going to come in one last time and I'm going to select the diamond shape. I'll select purple and I'll fill that. Okay, so my only other option now is if I'm creating, I might want to change the line, my outline, and I can do that by coming in here. So maybe I want to add a chain stitch and I'm just going to select one color and pour in. Now you see how the machine knows that I'm working in my line attribute, so my fills kind of disappear. They kind of fade into the background and it highlights my outlines. So now I'm going to assign, I'm going to magnify this so that I can see the line. Okay, and I have to add it here. Okay. So now if I want to save it to my memory pocket, I could say save it to the pocket. You could save it to a USB stick. I'm going to say next. I'm just going to say preview. I'm not going to change anything. So look at how pretty that is, and that is using your outline button to create and bring into the Design Center to create even more designs. I hope you enjoyed this instructional video on my Design Center on the Brother Stellaire XJ1 sewing and embroidery machine. As I said before, everything I showed you in this video also applies to the Brother Stellaire XE1 embroidery only machine and IQ Designer on the BabyLock Altair and Meridian. If you have any questions, please be sure to stop by our store or give us a call. You can also comment below. We're here to help you get the most out of your machines. These machines are available in-store only, so we hope to see you soon. Happy embroidering!